Have you ever had someone in your life who just vanishes? One day you're texting, sharing memes, swapping voice notes, maybe even making loose plans, and then suddenly, nothing. Days go by, then weeks. You check your phone, half annoyed, half worried. You wonder if you did something wrong. You replay your last conversation like a detective reviewing security footage. And just when you've decided they've fallen off the edge of the earth, they reappear. Casual, friendly, as if no time has passed at all. If you're that person, the one who disappears for weeks, you might be watching this with a slightly guilty smile. And if you're on the other side, you might be thinking, why do people do this? Are they avoidant, overwhelmed, secretly uninterested, or just wired differently? Here's the twist. The psychology behind disappearing for weeks is usually not what people assume. It's rarely about not caring. In fact, very often it's about caring too much, about how certain brains handle connection, energy, pressure, and time. Let me paint you a familiar scene. Imagine your social life is like a browser with too many tabs open, messages unanswered, conversations half finished, plans that exist only in theory. For some people, this barely registers. They thrive in the chaos. For others, every open tab hums quietly in the background, draining mental battery life. Even a friendly message can feel like a task, not because they don't like you, but because responding means engaging emotionally, cognitively, socially. And when their inner world is already loud, that tiny notification can feel like one more weight added to an already full backpack. A lot of people who disappear for weeks have nervous systems that are easily overstimulated. Their brains don't separate small social interaction from big emotional investment very well. A reply isn't just a reply, it's a doorway. Once they step through it, they feel an unspoken responsibility to be present, attentive, thoughtful. So if they don't have the energy to do that properly, they wait and wait. And then the waiting itself becomes heavy. Because now it's been days, and replying feels awkward. So they wait longer, and suddenly weeks have passed. There's also a deep time distortion happening here. Psychologists sometimes talk about time blindness, especially in people who are highly introspective, creative, or prone to hyperfocus. When they retreat inward, working, thinking, processing life, time doesn't move the way it does. For everyone else, a week can feel like yesterday. 2 weeks can feel like a brief pause. They're not counting days. They're swimming in thoughts, and those thoughts are often not shallow. Many people who disappear aren't zoning out. They're zoning in. They're thinking about who they are, where their life is going, what they want, what feels off. Silence becomes a tool. Solitude becomes a form of self-regulation. The outside world gets temporarily muted so they can hear themselves think. This is where the misunderstanding often happens. From the outside, disappearing looks like detachment. From the inside, it feels like survival. There's another layer too, and it's a big one: emotional self-sufficiency. Some people grow up learning, sometimes very early, that their inner world is something they have to manage alone. Maybe they weren't met with consistent emotional availability. Maybe vulnerability felt unsafe. Over time, they became incredibly good at processing internally. They don't reach out when they're struggling. They go quiet. They withdraw. Not because they don't want support, but because support feels foreign or complicated or like something they'd have to explain too much. So when life gets intense, their instinct isn't call someone, it's disappear and recalibrate. Think of it like a turtle pulling into its shell. The shell isn't rejection, It's protection. Ironically, many of these people are deeply empathetic. They care about how others feel, sometimes to the point that it becomes overwhelming. They don't want to respond with half energy. They don't want to show up distracted. They don't want to say the wrong thing. So instead of offering a version of themselves that feels incomplete, they offer absence. It feels cleaner, quieter, less risky. There's also perfectionism hiding in the background, not the obvious color-coded planner kind, the emotional kind. The belief that if you're going to show up, you should show up well, fully, thoughtfully. And if you can't do that, it feels better to wait until you can. The problem, of course, is that when I can is a moving target. Life doesn't pause to give you the perfect emotional bandwidth. So the waiting stretches on. Now let's talk about avoidance. Because yes, sometimes that's part of it, but not in the way people think. This isn't always avoidance of people. Often it's avoidance of emotional friction. Conversations bring expectations. Expectations bring potential disappointment. Disappearing removes all of that. No conflict, no misunderstandings, no pressure to explain why you feel the way you do. In a strange way, disappearing becomes a form of control. When you go silent, nothing new can happen. No one can demand more than you have. No one can misinterpret your tone. The world stays still while you catch your breath. And then, once you feel more like yourself again, you come back. This is why reappearing often feels casual to the person who disappeared. In their mind, they never emotionally left. They were thinking about you, remembering to reply, planning to reconnect. The relationship stayed alive internally. They don't realize that externally it felt like abandonment or confusion or rejection. That gap between internal continuity and external silence is where so many relationships strain or break. There's also a fascinating neurological angle here. Some brains are wired to seek stimulation and connection when stressed. Others are wired to seek withdrawal. Neither is wrong. They're just different stress responses. When cortisol rises, one person reaches out, another shuts down. If you're the shutdown type, disappearing isn't a choice you consciously make. It's a reflex. And society doesn't exactly help. We live in a culture that equates constant availability with care. If you don't reply quickly, you must not care enough. If you need space, you must be distant. But human psychology is more nuanced than that. Some people connect best in bursts, intense presence followed by deep solitude, like tides, in, then out. If you're someone who disappears for weeks, there's nothing inherently broken about you. But there is something worth understanding. Disappearing protects your energy, yes, but it can also unintentionally erode trust. People don't experience silence the way you do. They fill it with stories, and those stories are rarely kind to themselves. The empowering part is this: awareness changes everything. You don't have to become hyper-available. You don't have to explain your entire inner world. Sometimes a simple bridge is enough. A short message that says, "I'm laying low for a bit, but I care about you." That single sentence can prevent weeks of confusion. And if you're on the receiving end, if someone you care about disappears, this understanding can soften the narrative you tell yourself. It might not be about you. It might be about how their mind copes with being human. In a way, people who disappear are often doing deep internal maintenance. They're defragmenting their emotional hard drive, sorting through mental clutter, rebuilding capacity. When they come back, they often bring clarity, insight, and a calmer presence. Their silence wasn't emptiness. It was processing. So maybe The real question isn't why do they disappear, but what does their silence give them that the world doesn't? And what would it look like if we made a little more room for different rhythms of connection? Because not all distance is disinterest, not all silence is absence. Sometimes it's just someone finding their way back to themselves before they can fully show up for you. If this resonated, you're probably already reflecting on your own patterns or someone you know. Take a moment with that. And if you've ever disappeared or waited for someone who did, you're not alone in this strange, quiet part of human psychology. There's more to it than meets the eye. And if you want to keep exploring the hidden patterns behind everyday behavior, you know where to find me.